I'm here to inspire you to read what has arguably been the most life-changing book I've ever read. And that's Cybernetics. I was introduced to this book about 5 years ago. And admittedly, at the time, I think they were selling it for like $35. And I was like, I'm not going to pay $35 for a book. You know, I could find all kinds of other books at a much lower price. And I wish I had. Maybe it would have been the wrong time for me to read it. This book got me off the couch and got me to sit in front of a camera and start a YouTube channel about what I'm most passionate about, which is books, which is reading. This book helps you to ask yourself some real serious questions and then to go find real serious answers to those questions. I've read a lot of self-help books over my life. I'll continue to report on them on this channel. But this is the one book where it was like, Marty, it's time for you to stop thinking, planning, preparing, and sit down and do it. Make it a reality. The author of this book, what really touched me and made me feel like this was something I needed to really pay attention to was the fact that this author, he was a plastic surgeon. He was already making really good money. And he didn't write the book for fame or for more money. He noticed that there were, certain clients that when he finished their procedure, their outward procedure, their life changed. So whether it was a cleft palate, or maybe they felt their nose was too big, or their ears stuck out too much, or maybe they were too big, he noticed that with most of his patients, when he corrected whatever it is they felt was a defect, they had a change inside and they were able to kind of take off and soar. But there were a handful of people that even after he did a particular procedure to fix whatever it is they felt was an outward problem, they didn't have that interchange. And so he kind of calls his book a way to get an internal facelift. Change the way you see the world, change the way you see yourself. He calls your psyche the oarsman or the steersman of your actual behavior. So he says if you can reprogram your brain, all of your outward actions or activities will follow suit to your subconscious brain. Now, I grew up in the 80s. I'm a big product or fan of Star Wars. And as I'm reading this book and I'm reading what the author is describing, I'm reminded of when Luke Skywalker was being trained by Yoda. There was a phrase that Yoda said that I feel is very underquoted and underutilized. He says to Luke, you must unlearn what you have learned. And I think that's what the author of Cybernetics is saying, is you have to unlearn what you've learned. So if you grew up like me, where every time I wanted something, the answer was no. Hey, can I get a bike? No. Hey, can I get some shoes? No. Hey, can I get that shirt? No. Hey, can I get that candy? No. And the reason why it was always no was we don't have the money for that. We don't have the money for that. I can remember constantly being told we don't have the money for that. And then I grew up with kind of this mentality of, yeah, success is good for everybody, but not for me because I don't have the money for that. I'm not worthy of that. It's not something that I should have. It's something that I've had to unlearn, right? I've had to unlearn the messages that I've learned. I've had to remind myself over and over again that I am good. I am able. People do want what I have to offer. I think a lot of people fall into this trap. And it's not necessarily our parents' fault. They were probably just repeating what they had heard. And just following up on like the way they had been raised. And I'm not trying to put my parents down. They did the best they could with what they had. But I definitely have these messages that are very, very deep inside the innermost workings of my brain. And I've, since reading Psycho-Cybernetics, I've had to unlearn what I've learned and then reprogram my brain. And the key, I don't want to totally give everything away about this book. I really, really want you to be inspired to read this book and then take a minute to put down some of the things that you found motivating and inspiring in the comments below. He actually gives you the secret. He says as soon as a negative thought comes into your brain, it's like Pavlov's dog. You know, when Pavlov did his experiment with his dog, you know, he would ring a bell and then he would give the dog food. And then he found over time that he would ring the bell, the dog would salivate, he would give the dog food. Then over time, all he had to do was ring the bell, the dog would salivate. Whether he gave the dog food or not was irrelevant. All the dog had to do was hear that bell. And then he would immediately salivate and want to eat. Well, he said the same thing is applicable to negative thoughts or negative brain loops, right? Because we all have those negative brain loops. We also have positive brain loops too. We have the ability to be positive. But he says if you have a negative brain loop or you have a negative outlook on life, as soon as the negative thought enters your head, it should be like the bell. Okay, I got a negative thought. Replace it with a positive emotion. So he says, don't just go back and look at a positive memory. Remember how you felt while experiencing that memory, right? So like for me, when I get hit with a negative thought, I think about the day I got married, right? I love my wife. She's amazing. And I feel really, really connected to her. And she doesn't, quote, make me happy, but I am happy when I'm around her. And I was very, very happy the day that we got married. I chose to marry my wife. I made the decision myself. And I only did it when I knew it was right for us to do. Whereas with my first marriage, I was really influenced by my church and my parents and her, and it ended up being a very bad decision. But I love the fact that in Psycho-Cybernetics, you're taught to, as soon as you get a negative thought, replace it with a positive memory and a positive emotion. And that will help you to reprogram or unlearn what you have learned with your negativity. It's about the emotion. It's not about the thought itself. It's about the emotion that you felt when you had that positive feeling. That's the real kicker, the real key to having that change of thought or change of behavior or change of pattern. Now, there are a million other deep and powerful insights into this book. It's so well written. I will tell you that I also got the audiobook because my brother Tom got the audiobook. And there were things I picked up in the audiobook that I didn't pick up in the book that I read. Now, I did read this on my phone, as I do all my books, so that I have them with me and I can highlight and make notes. But I did find it very insightful to go back and listen to the audiobook of this. And I picked up things that I missed in the book itself. The book was audio. It was read by a guy who was a wrestler, a collegiate wrestler. I think he was also an Olympic wrestler. And he adds his own little spin in the audio version of this. As mentioned before, I've read a lot of self-help books, and this is definitely in that same genre of self-help. But this was the one book that not only inspired me to read more, but it inspired me to make actual measurable choices and decisions to move forward with things that I want to do that are really good for my soul. I highly recommend this book. And there are a number of books that I highly recommend. This is one of them. This is at the top. It will motivate you to change. It will motivate you to change the way that you think. It will motivate you to unlearn what you've learned and replace those negative brain loops with positive brain loops. And again, nothing would make me happier than to get 1 or 10 comments of people who decided to read this book because of the review that I put up, and it would be extremely helpful to get your insight as to what you felt was powerful and important about this book by leaving a comment below. If you've already read this book and want to leave a comment, that would be fantastic as well. I'd love to reply back and get more and more insight, because as I've mentioned in all my videos, I'm not the end-all be-all when it comes to these books, and they're open for everyone's interpretation and everyone's experience. So thank you for taking the time to watch my video on Cybernetics. I do hope to hear from you. I hope to hear how it has a positive effect on your life as well. Thank you so much. Have a great week.